Ethan divorced his white moonlight bride without hesitation after she cheated on him. He broke up with me and posted it on social media. I wished I could go back 8 years and change the fate of Emma, who had married that scumbag. She was the one he had always longed for. Later, both of us were transported back 8 years in time. He altered Emma's fate to prevent her from marrying the scumbag, while I changed my fate of being with him. When I saw Ethan's social media post, I had just finished an 8-hour surgery. On my way back to the office, I collapsed in the hallway from exhaustion. When I woke up, I was in a dim, unfamiliar private room, surrounded by colorful flashing lights and blaring music. Someone patted my shoulder and teased, "Claire, your drinking tolerance is terrible. Just one drink and you're out." My blurred vision slowly focused, and I realized it was Emma in front of me. She wore a short wine-red dress, and her slightly curled long hair cascaded down. I stared at her radiant and captivating face, remaining silent for a few seconds, before stumbling into the bathroom. Looking at the mirror, I saw a fair and delicate face staring back at me. I splashed cold water on my forehead repeatedly, unable to deny the reality. The scars were gone. I had traveled back to 8 years ago, the year I had just started college. Today was my roommate Emma's birthday. I had accidentally drunk a high-proof drink and passed out on the couch. Still groggy, I emerged from the bathroom and bumped into someone. Before I could apologize, a familiar deep voice said near my ear, "Sorry, are you okay?" My fingers instinctively tightened around my phone. I looked up to see the man before me. He was tall and well-built, with sharp, deep features. He wore a loose, plain black t-shirt. It was Ethan. Our gazes met and lingered for a few seconds. I ignored the ambiguous look in his eyes, lowered mine and calmly replied, "I'm fine," before brushing past him and returning to the couch. I had just taken a sip of bottled water when Ethan entered the room. Emma greeted him with a bright smile, clinging to his arm as she introduced him to us. "This is my brother." The vibrant lights continued to swirl as he stood with one hand in his pocket, glancing down at us with a faint nod. If not for the brief encounter in the hallway earlier, this would have been our first meeting in this lifetime. Ethan was Emma's biological brother. He was also the man I had loved and been with for 6 years. It wasn't until Emma's wedding day that I realized the one he loved wasn't me. He had gotten recklessly drunk that night, and while holding me in his arms, he murmured tenderly, "Emma, Emma." That moment I felt completely hollow, frozen in place. Took me a while to process what was happening. The person he loved was Emma, but that was when I loved him the most. So I pretended nothing had happened, stayed with him and kept believing his claim. "She's just my sister." Years later, when Emma divorced after being cheated on, I overheard her crying in Ethan's arms, saying, "Ethan, I never loved him. I've always loved you. Do you still want me?" He explained that their mother had a heart condition and had threatened to end her life if they were together, forcing him to feign affection for someone else and pair me with him. I didn't know if that was true, but Ethan believed her. That same night, he approached me and after a long silence said, "Hey Claire, let's break up." I looked at his handsome face and didn't even manage to ask the obvious, "Why?" before being called away for an emergency surgery. Suppressing my emotions with logic and composure, I spent 8 hours in the operating room. When I came out, the first thing I saw was Ethan's social media post. I wish I could go back 8 years to change Emma's fate of marrying that scum. Back now that I've returned to that time, I finally noticed the details I had previously ignored, or perhaps deliberately overlooked. Like the birthday cake Ethan had personally made for Emma, the way he gently coaxed the wine bottle out of her hands, or how he unhesitatingly carried her on his back when the party ended and she drunkenly insisted on being carried. The other 2 roommates marveled at how good her brother was to her. And back then, I naively believed he was just her brother. That's why later, when Emma found someone she liked and started pairing Ethan with me, Ethan's kindness and attentiveness had indeed moved me. But when the truth was revealed, I realized that his gentleness had never been directed at me. Whether it was a birthday or an anniversary, he always seemed disinterested. Yet whenever Emma was around, his attention was entirely on her, from beginning to end. Ethan only loved Emma. Like now, as I was sitting in the back seat of Ethan's car, sharing the space with my roommate who was passed out drunk, Ethan glanced sideways at Emma asleep in the front passenger seat. A strand of her long hair fluttered in the evening breeze. In the dim light, I silently observed as Ethan reached out his right hand toward Emma and softly murmured, "Emma, this time I won't let you marry him." My heart pounded violently at that moment. I closed my eyes, plunging into darkness, but the realization was clear. Ethan had also traveled back in time. He wouldn't let Emma marry anyone else, and I wouldn't stay with him again. Back at the dormitory, lying on a bed that felt both familiar and foreign, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily, blowing waves of warm air. My head throbbed slightly as I drifted into a fitful sleep. In my dreams, I seemed trapped in an endless loop, reliving the 8 years from meeting Ethan to breaking up with him over and over again. I heard him say, "Claire, let's break up." What finally pulled me from the nightmare was the vibration of my phone. I opened my eyes, dazed for a few seconds, then grabbed my phone and glanced at my schedule. Suddenly, I remembered I had a part-time job tutoring a high school student in English. Glancing at the time, I quickly got out of bed, freshened up, grabbed a random bag of bread and headed out. Thankfully, my subject was English, and because my work required me to read cutting-edge medical research, I hadn't let my English skills slip. I skimmed through the teaching materials beforehand to refresh my memory. The student was a high school girl. After finishing the prepared lesson, I began checking her English composition assigned by her school teacher. The topic was a simple one. Me in 10 years. Resting her chin on her hand, she asked me, "Miss Claire, do you think I could become a comic artist in 10 years? I replied confidently, "Yes, you can. You won't even need 10 years. In 8 years, you'll have a massive fan base and be a very popular artist." She tilted her head and asked, "Then will Miss Claire become a doctor too?" "Yes," I said. Just then, her eyes lit up, and she pointed excitedly toward the window. "Look, Miss Claire, that must be Mr. Ryan. He'll definitely become a physics researcher." Through the rain-splattered glass, I looked up and met the gaze of a tall figure walking under a black umbrella. My heart clenched tightly, and a flood of memories surfaced. He wouldn't live to see 10 years later. 2 years from now, he would die in a car accident. His name was Ryan Monroe, a prized student of the infamous Demon Professor in our neighboring university's physics department. He was often the center of conversations among girls, frequently appearing on confession walls across universities, known for his unparalleled looks and talent. The only perceived flaw was his humble beginnings. My interactions with him were minimal. I had seen him a few times in our school library. The most vivid memory, however, was during my junior year, when I went to the hospital to visit Ethan, who was sick. On my way back to campus, crossing a zebra crossing with other pedestrians, a speeding car ran a red light charging toward us. Amid the chaos and screams, a black Mercedes appeared out of nowhere, intercepting the car. The tires screeched violently as both vehicles collided with the distant guardrail. Instinctively, I ran toward the scene. Halfway there, a sudden explosion erupted. Flames engulfed my view, and for a moment, everything was silent. The cicadas on the nearby trees paused, only to resume their deafening cries moments later. No one survived inside the cars. A shard of glass grazed my forehead, leaving a scar. The incident made national headlines. The results revealed that one of the bodies belonged to the car's driver, a man who had lost everything to gambling and wanted revenge on society. The other was Ryan. He had borrowed his professor's car to retrieve some documents from another university and happened to be on that road on his way back. The internet was flooded with his information. Pictures of him, along with stories of his talents and accomplishments, spread rapidly. Many mourned his death, praising his beauty and brilliance. Some even said he died heroically, saving others. After all, he was alone in this world. His parents had both passed away during his senior year of high school. Later, I visited his grave with flowers and encountered his professor there. A chubby elderly man stood in silence before the tombstone. Only when a drizzle began did he sigh deeply and say, "That boy had such a promising future." For a long time afterward, I suffered from insomnia. My heart felt like it was submerged in water, heavy and achingly sore. I thought it was guilt and regret for him. A gentle tug on my wrist pulled me from my thoughts. I snapped back to reality, noticing that Ryan's figure had already disappeared from outside the window. My student's voice pulled me back completely, saying, "Miss Claire, I'm heading to Mr. Ryan's physics class now. Don't forget what I just said, okay? Don't be late tomorrow night." Honestly, I hadn't paid attention to what the student said earlier, but the distant memories from my previous life reminded me. Tomorrow was Ryan's birthday. Back then, his parents had been too busy to spend time with him, so he had asked me to keep him company. The rain outside had stopped at some point, and a warm ray of sunlight peeked through the clouds. I suddenly recalled the details I'd learned about Ryan online after his death. Tomorrow was indeed his birthday. But the truth was, Ryan never celebrated his birthday. He was born on a day marked by tragedy. His firefighter father had died in a fire during a rescue mission on the same day. He didn't even get to see his son once. I thought perhaps Ryan wouldn't want to hear happy birthday, but it was the day he came into this world, and he shouldn't have to face it alone. The next day, I arrived at my student's house ahead of the agreed time, carrying a cake and a gift. Ryan was teaching a lesson outside the window. The sun was setting. He was wearing a simple white shirt, holding a test paper while standing at the wooden desk. He lowered his head slightly to review the material, his demeanor elegant and composed. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but think of a rumor I'd come across in the past, a vague and unverifiable screenshot of a conversation. It was brief, just a few lines of text. Someone asked Ryan, "Do you have someone you like?" He replied, "Yes." "Then why not tell them?" The reply came 3 minutes later. "Forget it." Most people didn't believe someone like Ryan, with his exceptional looks and talent, could ever harbor a quiet, unspoken crush. By then, of course, he was already gone. The truth would never be known. Did he have a crush? It was destined to remain buried forever. Whether it was the father he'd never met, his mother who fell ill and passed away, the secret love he never confessed, or the bright future cut short, Ryan's life was full of regrets. A genius like him from our university's physics department deserved a better ending. When the lesson ended, the sky outside had darkened completely. My student eagerly grabbed her bag. The art supplies I had bought for her lay forgotten as my student sighed, hugging them tightly. "If only Mr. Ryan didn't have other plans, we could have had all three of us together," she said wistfully. I paused for a moment, then looked at Ryan, who was tidying up and preparing to leave. On impulse, I spoke up. "Mr. Ryan, why don't you stay?" Before I could elaborate, the power suddenly went out, plunging the room into pitch-black darkness. I coughed lightly and said, "We girls are afraid of the dark. Why don't you stay a bit longer?" The room fell silent for a moment, then with a small click, a flame ignited. Ryan had lit a lighter, shielding the small flame with his hand. The flickering light accentuated the sharp contours of his face, making his features even more defined. He looked at me and said simply, "All right." Using the lighter, I lit the candles on the cake and placed it in front of them. "Today we're celebrating the continuation of life," I said seriously, looking at them. "May the rest of your lives be safe and happy." Setting aside my guilt toward Ryan, no one wished more than I did for him to have a peaceful and happy life from now on. The dim room filled with the sweet scent of the cake as we shared it together. My student, biting her spoon, ran into the study and returned with her report card, saying excitedly, "Miss Claire, my mom said I improved so much on this exam, she wants to treat you both to dinner to thank you." Looking at the report card, I remembered this happening in my previous life. But back then Emma had asked me to help her move props for a photo shoot, so I politely declined the dinner invitation. As my thoughts wandered, I glanced at Ryan sitting quietly in the soft light. Suddenly, I realized something. On that dinner day in my previous life, I was supposed to meet Ryan properly, but I never made it to dinner. On my way, I had saved a child from being hit by a car and ended up in the hospital with a leg injury, unable to attend. To prove I wasn't just flaking on them, I took a photo and sent it to the girl's parents, showing exactly where I was along with a brief explanation to assure them I wasn't being unreliable. While waiting for the doctor to apply ointment, I casually scrolled through social media and stumbled upon Emma's latest post. It was a series of photos from her photography club's activities, and of course Ethan was in the frame as always. He showed up whenever Emma called. I remembered our 4th anniversary vividly. That day, Emma had a fight with her boyfriend, went to a bar, got drunk and called Ethan crying. "Ethan, I'm so upset, can you come keep me company?" That time, Ethan and I had just arrived at a nice restaurant for dinner. We hadn't even ordered when he stood up, ready to leave. I offered to go with him, but he stopped me, saying, "Emma's always been proud. She wouldn't want you to see her like this." I asked, "What about you? Would she want you to see her like that?" "It's different. We grew up together," he replied. Not long after, Emma made up with her boyfriend at a party. I overheard her jokingly telling him, "You're not the only one who likes me. If you make me angry again, I'll leave you." Ethan, who was nearby, silently drank his wine and said nothing. Deep down, Ethan must have always known Emma was fully aware of his feelings but pretended not to notice, continuing to enjoy his unwavering devotion while staying with the man she truly loved. As for me, Ethan's simple explanation, "She's my sister and she's your friend," was enough to silence any protest I might have had. Thankfully, in this new life, I wouldn't let myself become their convenient third wheel again. After getting my wound bandaged, I hobbled out of the hospital. Halfway down the street, it began to rain. The wound couldn't get wet, so I gritted my teeth against the pain and found a sheltered spot to call for a ride. Unfortunately, my phone had run out of battery. The late summer wind carried a slight chill as I resigned myself to waiting for the rain to stop. Just then Ryan appeared. He came through the rain holding an umbrella. Without a word, he removed his jacket, tied it around my injured leg, handed me the umbrella, and picked me up in his arms. "The road here is too narrow for a car. Let's find a better spot," he said. Leaning against his chest, I could smell a faint mix of bitterness and freshness. His steady heartbeat filled my ears as my gaze drifted from his Adam's apple to his profile. When we finally got into a car, I asked, "Why are you here?" He explained matter-of-factly, "Your student's mother was worried about you. She asked me to check on you since I had a meeting nearby. When I couldn't reach you, I started looking for you." The rain made the car interior feel damp and warm. I cracked the window slightly, wondering just how many places he had searched. Fatigue crept in and I fell asleep. When I woke up, the rain had stopped and we were at the campus gate. Ryan carefully helped me out of the car and carried me to the dormitory. Before leaving, I thanked him. He looked down at me with a faint smile and said, "No need to thank me, Miss Claire." Back in my dorm, I noticed that Ryan's jacket was still tied around my injured leg. A few days later, when I went to return it, fall had already arrived. Because of the rain and my need to rest, I hadn't left campus much. It was a sunny weekend when I finally went to find him. I realized I'd been impulsive. I didn't even have his contact information. Searching for him felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. I didn't find Ryan, but I did unexpectedly run into Ethan. I was passing by the basketball court when I heard someone shout, "Call an ambulance, he passed out." My instincts as a doctor kicked in and I ran over. Pushing through the crowd, a boy was unconscious on the ground. I immediately knelt down, performed CPR, and after about 15 minutes, he regained consciousness. The paramedics arrived shortly after, and as I stood up to leave, I noticed Ethan watching me from across the crowd. He was wearing a red and black jersey, his expression calm, his gaze steady. I picked up Ryan's jacket and turned to leave. Behind me, I heard a boy ask Ethan, "Do you know her?" "No," Ethan replied. I found a nearby cafe to rest and regain my strength. The occasional chime of the wind chime on the door was soothing as I idly played a game on my phone. The bell rang again and I looked up. Ryan was standing in front of me. At that exact moment, the sound of my game signaling game over played on my phone. I looked at Ryan in surprise and smiled. "What a coincidence to meet you here." The next second he raised an eyebrow and said, "Not a coincidence. I came to find you." Seeing my puzzled expression, he opened his phone and placed it in front of me. The screen displayed a post on the university's confession page. The image was of me performing CPR on the basketball court, with a caption that read, "Within 3 minutes, I want all the information about this woman." The post had been up for less than half an hour but already had hundreds of comments. Most people were just there for the excitement, but a few were making thoughtful observations. "She seems to know professional first aid techniques. Probably from the medical school nearby. Why is she on our campus? The jacket she's holding looks like a men's coat. Could it belong to her boyfriend? Is he from our university?" I didn't continue reading, feeling slightly embarrassed. I picked up the jacket beside me and handed it to Ryan. "I've washed it already," I said. That night, when I returned to the dorm, my ever-curious roommate immediately shoved her phone in my face. "Look at this," she exclaimed. On the confession page was a new post. "Case solved. She's Ryan's girlfriend from the physics department." The attached photo was of me handing the jacket back to Ryan at the cafe, with a pink filter that made the interaction look far more intimate than it actually was. As my roommate's gossiping spirit burned bright, I quickly explained the situation to her. After listening to the entire story, she sighed with disappointment but then added, "Well, this has potential. I'll ship it for now." I chuckled helplessly and glanced at Ryan's contact in my phone. His username was simply Ryan, and his profile picture was a plain white origami crane. After some thought, I renamed him as Mr. Ryan in my contacts. His social media was clean and sparse with only one post. "The wind is picking up." The timestamp matched the day we first met. For some reason, I was reminded of another timeline. On the 6th anniversary of Ryan's death, I visited his grave with a bouquet of flowers. The rain had just stopped, and the setting sun painted the sky in hues of gold and orange. My shadow fell on his tombstone as I silently gazed at his photo, the same composed and gentle face. Suddenly, a breeze swept by, lifting the strands of hair that had fallen over my face. The leaves rustled in the wind, sounding like the opening chapter of a new story. Then time reversed, and I was brought back to this moment where we met again. I felt fortunate to have returned before meeting Ethan. Instead of wasting this second chance on revenge, I decided to let us become strangers. Strangers, just like that day on the basketball court when he said he didn't know me. Freshman year was chaotic and hurried, and it ended abruptly. If my memory served me right, among the incoming freshmen at Ryan's university, there would soon be someone Emma would fall for. He was Ethan's direct junior. In the previous timeline, they met at a party organized by Ethan, and Emma quickly developed feelings for him. From there, she started pairing me with Ethan through her deliberate matchmaking and manufactured coincidences. Ethan eventually asked me to be with him. Now that Ethan had also returned to the past, he would likely prevent Emma from meeting that boy, ensuring he could be with her. That seemed like the inevitable conclusion. But fate often has a way of surprising us. During the last professional exam before the break, I was seated diagonally behind Ryan. I had just finished my paper and was about to hand it in when I noticed him suddenly wake from a nap. He stood up abruptly, grabbed his exam paper, glanced at it, and then looked around the room. Grabbing the arm of the confused student next to him, he asked, "What year is it now? Tell me, what year is this?" I silently watched his back as I walked up to submit my paper and left the room. Outside the exam hall, Ethan was waiting. As I passed him, he called out to me. I stopped and looked at him questioningly. He asked, "Are you with him now?" I didn't know what he meant by that question, so I simply replied, "What does it have to do with you?" After that, because of the break, I didn't see Ethan or Ryan for quite some time. I thought that by starting over, Ethan and Emma would finally find their way to happiness together. But I was wrong. Even in this new timeline, Emma didn't choose Ethan. She still fell for Ethan Jr., just as she had in the previous timeline. The exam hall fell silent except for the rustling of papers as students finished copying their answers. I watched Ryan from the corner of my eye as he continued to grip the student's arm. His face pale, almost as if he'd seen a ghost. The proctor, a stern-looking woman, marched over and demanded to know what was going on. Ryan let go and sat back down heavily, running his hands through his hair. After I submitted my paper, I walked out into the hallway, still puzzling over his strange behavior. That's when I noticed the poster on the wall. An announcement for the incoming freshman orientation. The date at the bottom made my blood run cold. It was from 2 years ago. But that was impossible. I was certain this was our final year before graduation. Ethan was waiting for me outside, just as I remembered from the timeline I'd lived through. But something was different about him too. His eyes held a haunted look, like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. When he asked if I was with Ryan now, I realized he wasn't just talking about a relationship. He was asking if I knew about what they'd both experienced. As the days passed, I began to notice other discrepancies. Ryan started showing up in places I'd never seen him before in my previous life. Always watching, always observing. And Emma, she seemed to be avoiding both of us, as if she could sense the temporal chaos that was beginning to unravel around us. One evening I found a note slipped under my dorm room door. The handwriting was familiar, but I couldn't place it. It read, "Time isn't linear here. We've all been given second chances, but the universe is fighting back. Meet me at the old library at midnight if you want to know the truth about why we're really here." The note wasn't signed, but something about it sent chills down my spine. As I prepared to go that night, I discovered that both Ethan and Ryan were also heading in the same direction, each having received identical notes. When we converged at the abandoned library, we found Emma standing there, holding a strange device that hummed with energy. "I've been trying to fix this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But every time I change something, something else breaks. We're not just rewriting our past, we're destroying our future." She looked at each of us in turn. "The question is, are we here to save ourselves, or to save everyone else from the consequences of our attempts to play God with time itself?" The device in her hands began to glow brighter, and I realized with growing horror that we might not be the first versions of ourselves to make this journey, and we certainly wouldn't be the last.